It's sad to contemplate what despots and dictators have done and are doing to their people. It's sadder still to realize that they are being subsidized in this horrific behavior by your money. We're having a debate now over foreign aid because they still want to send more. We gave money from dictators, from Saddam Hussein, who was once our ally, receiving billions of your dollars, to the Mujahideen, who were radical jihadists, but at the time we didn't mind if you were a radical jihadist, if you were our radical jihadist, because they were opposing the Soviet Union. But the Mujahideen actually eventually became the Taliban, who are now our enemies. We subsidized Gaddafi before we fought Gaddafi. We gave Gaddafi foreign aid. He was our friend. In the year preceding his overthrow, there were senators from this body speaking with Gaddafi's family about sending more money to Gaddafi. Foreign aid from developed countries in 2006 totaled $100 billion a year. Over the past 50 years, we've given $2 trillion. For those who say, oh, I just simply want to help people, I want to help poor people around the world by sending them money, it is stolen by their leaders, doesn't get to the poor people, and besides, you may have heard, we're $1 trillion short in our budget here. How are we sending money overseas? According to Coyne and Ryan, the world's worst dictators have received $105 billion under the guise of official developmental assistance. Instead of helping the poor, the assistance is aiding the ability of the dictators to remain in power. In fact, it keeps them in power long enough that it inflames the populace, that we end up having to go back in because of war, because the populace is so inflamed against a dictator that we've propped up against popular rule. It's often said that it's difficult to determine whether a recipient is a friend or a foe. Libya is an example. With an alacrity sped by naivete, the West welcomed Gaddafi back into the bosom of respected nations. Delegations of U.S. senators, ones who are still in this body, went to meet with Gaddafi, to meet with Gaddafi's family, to offer Gaddafi money. President Bush concluded that Libya was no longer a sponsor of terror. 3 senators met with Gaddafi's son and according to leaked cables, offered him aid. Fast forward barely a year later into the Arab Spring, and these same senators who were offering Gaddafi aid were back in Libya offering the rebels aid. We should scratch our head and say, my goodness, maybe we should question the judgment of these people who tell you foreign aid should be given to everyone all the time, and if they misbehave, give them more. Because you have senators from this body going and offering aid to Gaddafi, and a year later offering it to the rebels to overthrow Gaddafi and saying Gaddafi is a terrible dictator. He always was. Egypt. Egypt is a pile of contradictions. Over the past 30 years, we bought this sort of regime there to do our bidding when we wished. It became very unpopular with the people. And so you wonder about the Arab Spring and you wonder, why are these people so unhappy? Well, they hated Mubarak because he was a dictator, but he was our guy. We paid for him. So you have to think this through. Why is there such a widespread anti-Americanism? Because we propped up and gave money to so many despots, to so many dictators. So we have to think, why are we seeing people burning the American flag? Why are we seeing such great unrest in 30 different countries? Because our foreign aid and our military aid has propped up dictators who become over decades despotic, autocratic, who torture their people, prevent freedom from occurring, and then there's a backlash. David Reif of the New Republic reports, U.S. military aid to Egypt, which averages $1.3 billion annually, allowed the Egyptian police and paramilitaries to bombard protesters with volley after volley of tear gas made by a company in Pennsylvania. Why are they angry? They know this. We have to understand the dynamic if we're ever to try to improve the situation. The U.S. military aid and tactical training given to Libya, Egypt, and Tunisia to fight terrorism was used to fight against free association and freedom of speech of their people. But you have to understand, why did the Arab Spring, that seemed to be a search for freedom and democracy, why did it get transformed into an Arab winter? Why did it get transformed into an anti-American protest? Because the tear gas that rained down on them for decades was made here. Because the police batons were paid for with your money. So when they hated Mubarak, they hated you also. They hated us because we were Mubarak. They hated us because we were Ben Ali in Tunisia. They hated us because we were at one time Saddam Hussein's friend. But it's confusing to us because we think, oh, they hate what America is all about. They hate America for our wealth and freedom. They don't hate wealth and freedom. They really probably don't hate us in the abstract. But they hate us because when they see Mubarak, when they see the other end of a truncheon coming from the police of Mubarak, or the police of Saddam Hussein, or the chemical weaponry and the chemical gas that Hussein sprayed on his people, they see where it came from. And one of the saddest stories that came up, I think, in the last week was a young soldier was killed in Afghanistan. He was killed by the policeman, the Afghan policeman that he was training. But he called his dad a week before and he said to his dad, I think the guy that I'm training is going to kill me. The Afghan policeman had been coming up to him for weeks saying, we don't want you here. I think it's time to come home from Afghanistan. Now people say, on the other side, they say, oh, you want to disengage. No, I want to have relationships with countries around the world. I want to have diplomatic relationships. I want to have trade. But I don't think having diplomatic relationships or engaging with other countries means you have to bribe them. When you hear these numbers of billions of dollars that dictators have secreted away in Swiss bank accounts, listen to that and remember when you hear the plethora of senators who will come to the floor and say that not one penny of foreign aid should ever be cut. Ever. Is anybody besides me mad that we are sending foreign aid to African dictators whose sons are importing Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, Ferraris, and Bugattis to Africa, to countries that have no electricity? I don't care if you're the biggest humanitarian in the world and you want to help people, it's not going to the people. The foreign aid is stolen by the leadership of these countries, and this isn't one example. This is example after example, decade after decade, and the learning curve around here is so slow that we will get 10, maybe 20 senators to place any restrictions on foreign aid. When you look at the polls of the American people, you find that nearly 80% of the American people think foreign aid in general is a bad idea. You need to be bad. There needs to be an American spring. An American spring where you tell your leaders you're sick and tired of your money going to fund dictators. An American spring where we understand what happened in the Arab Spring. We need to begin to understand where the anger is coming from. When you prop up dictators in third world countries who beat their subjects into submission, that's why they're angry. They don't care that we're wealthy or free. They're angry because we prop up dictators who beat them with truncheons. Despite widespread reports of abuse, corruption, and ineffectiveness, foreign aid continues unabated. Despite polls that show over 70% of the American voters are opposed to foreign aid, it continues unabated. Even when advocates of foreign aid are beaten down with stories, such as I've been telling today, of human rights abuses, starvation, and downright death threats, hangings, shootings, executions, these advocates trot forward their last defense. But foreign aid is only 1% of the budget. It's only $30 billion. You know how many times they use that argument? Every time I want to cut $30 billion. It's only $30 billion. They use it for $300 million too. It's only $300 million. If you don't get started somewhere, how are you going to ever balance your budget? They argue eliminating foreign aid won't balance the budget. No, it won't, but it's a start. And you have to start somewhere, and why not start with something that's counterproductive? Nevertheless, the advocates of foreign aid justify the continuing aid with the argument that we must often choose the lesser of two evils. As many have pointed out, the lesser of two evils is still evil. I'm asking for 6 weeks to place restrictions on foreign aid. I'm not even asking to end it, although I would. I'm asking simply to place restrictions on it. And you watch this vote. If I get this vote, you watch. The vast majority of the Senate is going to vote for unlimited, unrestricted foreign aid. I will probably lose this vote. But if you ask your friends, if you go home and you ask your friends, should we be sending money to countries that disrespect us, to countries that burn our flag? I think you'll find that 80 to 90% of the American people wouldn't send another penny.